Okay, I call the November 3rd meeting of the school committee to order. Let me just take a quick spin through the agenda this evening. So we're going to start with innovation pathways at the high school. Mrs. Callan is here to talk to us about that. We'll move on to public comment for anything that's not on the agenda, our consent agenda, and then reports. Dr. Milachewski is going to come back with, or I guess, take round, it's not really round two. Dr. Milachewski is going to fulfill the promise that we made last time and present superintendent goals as well as focus indicators. We'll review and likely to take a vote to approve those this evening. And then we'll have a discussion about FY24 budget guidance as Ms. Baton and the team start to prepare the budget for the upcoming season. We've got two new policies for which we'll do a first reading this evening. And I will remind folks how the sort of reading structure works when we get there. We'll adjourn to an executive session for two topics. One is to conduct a strategy session in preparation for negotiations with our collective bargaining units, and as well as to discuss strategy with respect to litigation. Once we adjourn from executive session, we'll come back to open session and take a vote publicly before adjourning for the evening. So that's the agenda for the evening, and we will start with innovation pathways, and Ms. Callanan. I think I probably have a presentation from you here.
And this was TV, we can't see there, correct?
I'm sorry?
Are we good if she presents from there, or do we want her up here?
Yeah, she can present. Yeah,
RCTV.
They can't hear her on the Zoom if we do that, but there's nobody else on the Zoom right now, so. Nope. Because the mic is right there, so the mic doesn't reflect behind her.
Why don't we sit just at the end of the table here where there's.
Over here?
Is that okay?
Sure.
And I will share the presentation and I'll give you the remote. Theoretically, that should work from there.
All right. Yeah, there we go. You ready?
We're ready.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jessica Callanan. I am the Director of Academic Achievement for Reading Memorial High School. And first, I want to thank everybody for having me here tonight. The teachers and the department heads that have been working very diligent with me on this project all had family commitments this evening and feel bad that they couldn't be here, but they have endorsed the presentation and the work that we're doing. So I want to applaud them for all their work as well. And listening to all the crazy ideas that I have, and I think what we've put together is pretty exciting. So this evening I'm presenting on what is known as Innovation Pathways. It is a program that is through the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. And all of their, what they refer to at DESE as high quality college and career pathways. There are other things that fall under this umbrella, but the innovation pathways that we are seeking to achieve a designation in Reading for up to 3 pathways this year or for next school year fall under this as well. And so there are components that I'm going to review in just a couple of moments of these core characteristics that our pathways would also fulfill, which also fulfills the needs of the Department of Education. And I did not include this, I think, well, I'll wait. I did include something later in the presentation. I'm sorry. Getting used to, here we go. So I think a big question is, what is innovation pathways? And I touched upon this briefly, but they are pathways built within high schools that start recruiting students as early as 8th grade, if not, and also 9th grade when it first kicks off. But all the classes that would be created or part of the pathway are open to all students at a high school, but it does take 3 to 4 years to finish a pathway and then end that with a capstone or internship, which I'll get to in a moment. But broadly defined, it is, you work with Mass Hire, which we are working with, as well as the Reading Chamber of Commerce, to identify different industries in this area, preferably in Reading, but if we can't have an industry in Reading that is connected to those that we're trying to create, we do expand a little bit outside of Reading. And where there's a need for people to either go into that field after college or even directly after high school through a certification program or a 2-year college. And so I started, bless you, very early on when I came to Reading sorry, somebody's phone's going off, to start to build relationships with these partners. So starting with the Chamber of Commerce, I reached out to Mass Hire. I have worked with them in my previous district, and they are the same representatives for our region, and built those relationships so that they could help us identify who these industry partners are in Reading or the surrounding towns, where our students could either actually complete capstones or internships at the end of their pathways, or they could be advisors to us along the way. And that we've actually already started with an advisory board. Please interrupt me if you guys have questions. So these are the guiding principles of Innovation Pathways, not designed by me or us in Reading, but as designated by the Department of Education. There is an emphasis on equitable access. So I have done a dive into our most recent data here in Reading, as well as gathering information from the industry partners as to what are some groups that aren't represented in the fields that we're looking in, as well as what are some groups within Reading Memorial High School that may not be going into these industry pathways that we are trying to build. As well as academic guidance, and so I've worked very closely with Miss Lena Williams, who is the Director of Counseling here at the high school. There is additional training that we go to as a team here from Reading, and we will be going in November, and it's around what is called MyCap. It's very similar to a lot of guidance curriculums, but they want to make sure that in addition to what we're already doing with students with our guidance department, that these other components are covered, which includes talking about vocational opportunities as well as technical opportunities and four-year college opportunities. That goes along with the enhanced student support. There is a connection to career, which is why you recruit the industry partners and why it culminates with a capstone class and project or an internship in the student's senior year. So I referred to the innovation pathways on the slide as IP. All innovation pathways are open to all students, like I said in the beginning, but you do have to have students finish 4 classes, 1 in each school year, but those, for your first year, you can start with who our current freshmen are. So they could finish 3 classes, and 2 of those classes have to be technical courses, and I'll describe what they are, what ours will be, hopefully, in a couple of minutes, and then 2, what is qualified as advanced classes. So that can be advanced in the content that we're building, or advanced as in dual enrollment or advanced placement. Like I said, I've already met with the middle school principals to talk to them about this program. We are in the planning phase. This entire year is a planning phase, and I have applied for a $25,000 planning grant through the Department of Education. I think that we're going to get it, but we'll find out in about a week. And so that money would be used to do deeper work in planning this and also promoting the program throughout this year, while students are signing up for classes for next year. Our targeted groups, which you have to target 2 different groups that you feel are underrepresented to be part of these pathways. So how we did that was I looked at our Department of Education data and the number of students in all of the groups that are not your whole group of students, and to see which are underrepresented in these fields. And so the two industry sectors that we're looking to develop our first pathways in, one is in information and one is in advanced manufacturing. And so just a couple pieces of data that I use to help make this decision. I also talked to other principals that have been doing this. I actually built two innovation pathways in my previous school with the help of all my curriculum leaders and teachers. And so I do have experience actually putting these into place, but I didn't go to that school because those kids are not at their senior year, and I really wanted to talk to students that were at the capstone or at the internship phase. So why females were identified? Females are about 50% or 48% of our student body right now. That's pretty consistent from year to year. The reason that we looked at having females go into these pathways is that last year in 2020, 2021, approximately 8.2% of males participated in computer science courses at Reading Memorial High School. We would like that to be more overall, but only 3.9% of females. So it's about half. And then when we're talking to our industry partners that we've identified, both Microsoft or their philanthropic arm, which is referred to as TEALS, and Weston and Sampson, they're saying that the industries are still reflecting about 30% of the people that are working in STEM are females. So still 80% of those working in STEM in Massachusetts, and I'm pretty sure that's duplicated nationally as well, it's very disproportionate. So that is one of the groups we're looking at. So if you had a class, innovation pathway class, the goal would be 50% of the students in the class are female. And right now, that's not being reflected when we look at just, for example, our computer science classes in the last DESE report. So that's one group. And then the second group is our high needs group. And your high needs students are students that, for example, are economically disadvantaged and may have an IEP. But there can be a combination of different marginalized groups. That is a pretty significantly large population in Reading Memorial High School. It's about 25% of our students. And so our goal would be in any innovation pathway class that's running, that about 25% of those students or more would also be part of this high needs subgroup. And you do that because you want to open up doors, break down barriers, and open up access to students in these classes. And frankly, we don't know, we're in the planning phase, how many students are going to be interested in these classes. We hope they're exciting and kids want to do them, but that's part of the whole year of planning phase. So I just wanted to give a little bit of insight into that because I think there's a lot of question as to why, there's certain groups. You do have to have an equity emphasis when you're doing the innovation pathways, and you do have to pick groups that you're targeting to be more involved in these areas. And I have more data because I did write about a 50-page grant, and I can provide you guys with all of it if you'd really like to read it anytime. Let's see. So the application process, there will be an application process for students, but it isn't an application process to screen students out based on GPA or attendance or discipline or anything like that. It has to do with making sure that we have the representative groups within the class to see how many kids are interested prior to doing course selection so that we can make sure that we have enough teachers allotted and sections that we're able to run. I think that's it for here.
So can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure,
So
absolutely.
that implies that there's no ceiling on the number of students that can pursue one of these pathways would be our plan?
The ceiling would be whatever the ceiling is for our class sizes. So, if the max is 24, it's 24, per the RTA contract. Or if you had let's say you had 50 students that wanted to take the class, then you could run 2 sections.
Right.
But so it basically is based on interest.
But we're gonna drive scheduling based on interest and enrollment, not the other way around, is the point.
Say that again?
Well, I mean, so I think what you're saying is if there are enough students to support 2 sections, we're gonna create 2 sections, but rather than saying there's one section available for scheduling, and so we're only going to accept 24 students.
I will, I'm going to answer this based on somebody who's built the master schedule. I did it for 6 years. It's very complicated, but my goal would be to, yes, because you want as many kids that you can to start and to finish the pathway. And I know from experience in running this in my previous district that some kids decide they don't want to pursue it all 4 years. And so, yes, but we've also built it so the classes that they would take as a freshman or a sophomore are also classes that fulfill some graduation requirements. You know, whether it's an art class or a business class. Jada, do you have a question?
Yes, I have two actually.
Okay.
How would the enrollment in one of these pathways affect graduation requirements and Gen Recs?
It actually fulfills part of your general, requirements, or I'm going to show you a breakdown of the classes in a second, or your art requirement, or a business requirement, or a science requirement. So that it meets, it's not completely different subject area, it's subject matter that's within a lot of things that we already offer.
Okay.
Okay.
And with the STEM focus on a higher enrollment of women, do you see a difference between different categories in STEM? I know in my physics class there are only 4 girls in a class of 28, whereas most of the AP bio classes are mostly female.
Well, that's a great question. And so, like I said before, the two areas that we're looking at are information, and under information is digital media and computer science, and then under advanced manufacturing, we're really looking at engineering. So that would be not your life sciences, which is what you're talking about with biology, but more so your physics, your chem, and classes like that. Does that help? Or engineering classes. Okay, I'm on the wrong slide on my paper, but like I said, these are the areas that we're looking at already. And I think it's important to note that traditional vocational schools are not eligible to apply for these grants. And if we get the planning grant and we're awarded the designation, then we're able to apply for an implementation grant that's can be up to $75,000. The planning grants are up to $25,000. And so that affords us a lot of opportunity to augment the courses that we're offering with not necessarily personnel, but new equipment, advanced equipment, building relationships with more industry partners, getting people to come in here and present. It's just a lot of really interesting and relevant opportunities for our students. Chuck?
Go ahead, Chuck. And then we have a question on the Zoom as well.
Thanks. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Can you just
Go back?
Yeah. My question is, do all of these sectors get the same emphasis, or are you saying advanced manufacturing and information are more?
No, I'm saying advanced manufacturing. These are the 5 areas that DESE supports innovation pathways, and that I think we're amazing at Reading Memorial High School, but we're starting in 2 of the sectors instead of trying to start with 5. And from my experience in starting these in another district, it's very hard to do 5 or 10 of them. It's nearly impossible all at the same time. So we want to apply for 2 to 3, do them with fidelity, make sure that students have interest, and do it well, and perfect our practice, and then hopefully expand it to some of the other areas as well.
Can I?
Sure.
So I guess the reason why I asked that question is, when I look at our economy, and especially if you're trying to get partners locally, I look at the middle 3 as more relative to what our economy is in Massachusetts versus the other 2 around here. Does that make sense?
I understand what you're saying. The reason that we went with information and advanced manufacturing is partially because our teachers are poised to teach those courses. We do have new courses that we're adding, but more importantly, because those are the industry partners in the area of Reading that came forward to say that they were willing to partner with us. And so, for example, with the advanced manufacturing, we're looking at engineering, more specifically civil engineering and environmental engineering underneath that pathway.
Versus an actual manufacturing company. I look at engineering
Right.
as different than
Absolutely, but under advanced manufacturing engineering is a common pathway under that. We do also have a partnership with Associated Builders, the Builders Corporation, which is a local, it's in Woburn, but the parent actually lives in Reading, and ABC is the acronym. It's a construction company, but it's a very large company that also has manufacturing. So possibly down the line, we might be able to expand into additional branches of the engineering. Yes, Ms. McLaughlin.
I was going to add color commentary to your point, Chuck. So Massachusetts actually has the highest number of STEM jobs in the entire country. So focusing on information and technology is hugely important for our economy.
I don't know if that's okay.
So I don't mean to put you on the spot, but a couple times you've said 2 to 3, 2 to 3. What's the third one you might consider on here?
If everyone's ready, I can go to the next slide and I'll show you. Okay.
Can we just, before we do, sorry, there's a question on the Zoom. It's been probably pending for a couple slides, so.
Back.
Ms. Downing, you should be able to unmute yourself, I think.
Yes, there she is.
Go ahead. I think we can hear you.
Raise the sound over there. Slide that bar over. There you go.
Ms. Downing, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
We
Yep.
can.
Yes.
You can hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so thank you, Ms. Callanan. I have a question kind of building on what one of the students asked you about why you're targeting females. I know you're basing it on the enrollment in computer science, but I'm looking at DESE now, and actually females exceed males in advanced coursework in math and science at Reading High. In Reading, 36.9% of females enroll in an advanced science course versus only 25.5% males. And for math, it's pretty much tied, 60.5% females, 59.4% males. I do notice women are going to college at a higher rate in Reading. So I guess I'm just, and I speak as a person with, 2 engineering degrees who was in STEM for 10 years. So I'm not trying to say don't target women, but I would have hoped you would have targeted maybe Blacks and Hispanics, because those students are taking higher level classes at far lower percentages than the other students in the population. I totally appreciate the perspective of computer science, but as the students pointed out to you, there are other advanced courses. And then my other question actually is with the slide you have that's coming up, because you're listing some courses that don't exist at Reading High, but you don't have the asterisk as new, at least according to the program of studies. Like environmental engineering doesn't exist. There's environmental science, several versions of that. And I don't believe several of there's intro to digital media under music, but I don't believe the digital music production and digital marketing exists. So maybe there need to be a few more asterisks, but that was it. And I didn't know if you wanted to respond to my question about the females who in other STEM areas besides computer science.
Sure, thank you. So computer science, I did highlight the numbers there. And I think first of all, advanced coursework is broadly defined by the Department of Education. It is all dual enrollment in AP courses. It is a handful, international baccalaureate if you have that, and it goes down to a handful of science and math classes that are not dual enrollment or advanced placement. And so I think what I tried to do is get more granular in looking at not just the females or students that are in science classes per se, but to look at females that are in our, as Jada brought up, are in things like computer science, in physics, in advanced calculus or AP calculus, AP statistics, and that does not mean that we are not looking at all students. The emphasis of the Innovation Pathways program, the essence of it is around equity and opening up access. And so if you look at the slide that's up now, the 2 courses that are offered, or the courses that are offered in 9th and 10th grade, There is no prerequisite to get into those courses. The teachers are trained and the guidance counselors are trained to continually encourage these students to try a dual enrollment class or to try an advanced placement class. And right now, the representation in our advanced placement classes is not reflective of our student body. And so we want more of a representation of all marginalized groups in our advanced coursework. I mean, and I can speak to that at another time, but if we're staying focused on the innovation pathways, we want the courses at the back end, the dual enrollment, the advanced placement, to have a more a different face where more students either try it so we have more sections, or that it's more it's reflecting of the entire student body. And that's not uncommon in a lot of schools for your higher level courses to not reflect a lot of the marginalized groups. It's not unique to Reading. But I think what we've talked about a lot this year as a leadership team is moving from good to great. And I think if we can change some of what is being, what are the barriers to those students getting in the classes, and that's what these introductory 9th and 10th grade technical courses do. In addition, the training that the guidance department will go through, Ms. Williams, Lynna Williams, will take the students that are in the innovation pathways, and they already meet with those freshmen, sophomore students, all 4 grades, 8 to 10 times during our flex blocks, and she will meet with the students in additional 5 to 7 times that are in the innovation pathways to make sure that if there are any barriers existing or challenges that they're facing that we may not be able to foresee, that we can address them as they come up. Especially when they're in 9th and 10th grade, before they take that leap to a dual enrollment class or an advanced course. I will tell you that we did tweak some of the names of the courses. Like in our program of studies, I'm switching to the second question that you asked. We have Piano 1 and Piano 2. We will change the name to digital piano. And that is because we're hoping through the grants to be able to purchase very advanced keyboards. I'm probably not doing that justice, it's not what they're called, but pianos that link to software that eventually students are able to build and create songs and then produce their own music, and then take a business class, which we did change the name of, to digital marketing to promote the music and what they've produced. And so they aren't necessarily brand new classes, but there are several on there that I changed the name of, but the brand new content would be the advanced music production, obviously the capstone and internship that happens in the senior year, that's at least 100 hours long, and the computer networks and/or computer ethics class. We have a teacher that teaches computer science here that already is an adjunct professor at UMass Lowell, and he teaches these classes at UMass Lowell, and I'm reaching out to them to, hopefully he's reaching out to his contacts there, so that we can build that partnership and open up hopefully some dual enrollment opportunities. And we have AP Environmental. You are correct. I think Ms. Downing, is that correct? That it would be a different course. Like I said, we are very much in the planning phase here, but that may not get approved by the Department of Ed because it isn't directly under engineering, but the industry partner that we're partnering with, which is Weston and Sampson, they said to me on the phone in a meeting that they're looking for both civil engineering and environmental engineering. So I'm hoping, I wrote that rationale into the grant, that the Department of Ed will approve it, but it could change. These are definitely not locked, locked in whatever, stone, whatever that saying is.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I'll mute now. Since we're on the courses, just a couple questions. So you're probably aware that up until this year, the only computer science class that was being offered was AP Computer Science.
Yep. Yes.
So I'm sure a lot of students will be excited to see more computer science classes. So I have 2 questions related to that. One is, will students within the pathway be given priority? Do you imagine there will also be space and options for students not on the pathway? My second question is around the AP Computer Science. there's often been a contingent of sophomores who take it as an opportunity to take an AP class as a sophomore. I don't know if anything changed, like we now require intro to computer science before they take the AP, because obviously when it was the only class, right? But, you know, I think maybe they looked at their math background, but I would hate to see that opportunity taken away, because there's so many APs that you can't access until you're a junior or senior. So will this potentially limit access to sophomores?
In no way, shape, or form will the innovation pathways limit anybody's opportunity to take classes. Obviously, we only have so many teachers, and so a lot will be determined once we see the course requests. And so we have a lot of work to do to promote the pathways, to explain to people what they are. The Intro to Computer Science and Intro to Java are not a prerequisite to being in AP Computer Science, but students will be designated, and even with DESE, coded that they're part of the innovation pathways, and we're measured by the number of students that start and finish. And so that is something that is closely tracked, and, you know, I have faith that DESE did their research, that this makes it students more inclined to be successful after high school in whatever path they choose. I had another thought that I wanted to... We are partnering with Microsoft and TEALS, which is the philanthropic arm of Microsoft, like I said. I've worked with them in the past. They're amazing, but they also have an enormous emphasis on equity and making sure that these computer science courses are open to all students. So as long as we have enough teachers, we'll be offering as many as we can, and there definitely will be some students in that class that are part of the innovation pathways and some students that aren't. Something I do think it's important to note that the school, it's great if 10th graders can handle and take AP and dual enrollment classes, but the school district gets no points in terms of the accountability data for students in 9th and 10th grade taking advanced placement and dual enrollment classes. They only count Department of Ed kids in 11th and 12th grade. It doesn't mean we shouldn't do it, but it's just something to know. Yes, Judy.
How will these coincide with like the, especially in the engineering and the computer science, with the science requirements? Because I think right now you're required to take two or three lab sciences.
Usually 3. Yeah.
So will you still be taking biology, chemistry, and then typically physics, or
Yes, and so that's a great question, Jada. So what we're looking at, if someone started in the innovation pathways, for example, in the Intro to Engineering Design, they would also have a pre or co-requisite, depending on what year they enter that, of Introduction to Physics. So you would take Introduction to Physics, which is a lab science, and would feed into your MCAS as a freshman, and take engineering, intro to engineering at the same time, or you take physics first and then engineering. And also depends on what math course you're in, because there's certain math that feeds into the intro to engineering class. And so I am working with Principal Tracy as well as Dr. Hardy and a pretty large committee at the high school to also look at ways to open up the schedule for students to give them a little bit more freedom of choice as they come in. And that is a work in progress, so I don't want to divert and get onto that topic, but it goes hand in hand with a lot of the things that we're talking about. And I am new to Reading, but I'm trying to learn as quickly as I can to make sure that the needs of the students are first and foremost.
I just want to emphasize something that Jess just shared too, is that in that scheduling work right now, we realize that there's some pieces that are kind of blocking student access, and it's becoming even more apparent when we're looking at innovation pathways now too. So I think that we're looking at just like unlocking some of those, but as you know, that's tricky, but that's been part of our focus in that. And we recognize that that's a long-standing issue that just is reflected in this process as well. And Jada, that's a great question. So any other piece of feedback too and questions, please.
I've also noticed that like AP Physics 1 is the highest level class that you can get within the engineering path, and we offer AP Physics C, which is a higher class. Do you see students being able to take either, or?
It could be, that was the one. So I've been working very closely with Mr. Albright, who's the head of the science department and engineering. Miss Allison Williams, who's the head of the Math and Computer Science Department, and Dr. Mosier, that's the head of the Art Department. And so a lot of these have to do with, yes, do they make sense as a pathway? Do we have an industry partner that's willing to partner with us in this actual content? And then what classes do we think are most accessible to students? It doesn't mean you could not take some of those at the same time, Jada, or that maybe somebody wants to swap out and take AP Physics 1 and the next physics after. But these would be the base of what a pathway would be. And then ending with the capstone or internship. So the Department of Ed requires that the end of your innovation pathways is at least a 100-hour internship. And they do like to have school districts choose either or, a capstone or an internship. I wrote a rationale/justification and met with the representative from the Department of Ed, advocating that we could do both. And the reason is that we could open up more access to students. So in my previous school where we did this, some kids wouldn't participate in innovation pathways because at the end of their senior year, they did not feel like they could do an internship because they were taking 3 or 4 AP classes. And so these students could opt to take a capstone, which is a project-based learning class, which like when we went to Uxbridge High School and saw their program, a lot of the kids in the class were solving problems in the community and building things to solve those problems, depending upon what pathway they were in, or in the school. And so there's a whole bunch of things around the school that the kids had identified as a problem, created something, and then addressed the issue, or just things that they qualified as annoying. And then other students could go into the industry, which is why you want your partners to be close by, because they could then do an internship actually at some of the industry partners that we've identified, some of which are sitting on our advisory board now, but will definitely continue to expand for other internship opportunities at the latter half of the senior year.
Carla hasn't spoken yet, so.
So when you went for your, when you went to visit, between the capstone versus the internship, were you surprised by anything you heard from a student who did the capstone rather than an internship? Or, if you were going to encourage a student one way or another, I'm just curious as to if there were any positives in one or things like that.
I think it really depends on the student. I think it's important for us to find very strong industry partners because you want students going into the field that they're actually interested in, and you want those partners to want the students to be there. And you really have to work and find places to do that because a lot of times there's qualifiers that a student needs to be a certain age or have a certain certification, some of which we might be able to work through while we're here, like maybe getting students their OSHA 10 certification if they're going into certain businesses. It gives them a leg up to start. Both of them were very interesting and when we were in Uxbridge. And I think that I really hope that the Department of Ed approves both our requests for both. And I tried to write it as our goal was to open up access and not to limit or close off this opportunity to any students. And I think it's really important for our students that are in really high-level courses or just don't want to leave the school a quarter early and they want to be here, that they have this protected time to work on a capstone project with a person who's a teacher who also knows what the capstone project is, could even be in their subject area. But if you have students working in engineering and digital media, they could be in the same capstone class, but working together on a project or working on 2 independent projects. And the teacher that's there is the leader in guiding them and making sure that they stay on track. It's very spelled out, how you go through and document that the students are both doing internships or doing the capstone.
Thank you.
So I might be getting too into the nitty gritty, in which case just say, we don't know yet.
Okay.
But I love the idea of the internship. I'm trying to wrap my brain around how it actually works. So I'm thinking about things like we require 4 years of English and math. So regardless of whether they're taking AP, there's still some courses that they're going to have to be in second semester, senior year. We still require PE. I don't know if that happens in the fall or the spring for seniors, but,
Yes.
and then there's the idea of, even if it's in Reading, how are they getting there? Are we expecting that parents are driving them? Are we expecting these students have access to their own vehicle? Do you know how other schools have handled that, like the transportation piece, and also just fitting it around any senior year schedule, let alone APs?
So I think that, one, it's important to also kind of bring in that most schools, most high schools in Massachusetts or even in New England are moving towards some sort of a capstone or internship type of experience for seniors, even in the full second half of their senior year or fourth quarter. I did this in my previous job as a principal, where we had seniors doing internships, and they had to take classes up until the end of their third term. Our seniors do get out a little bit earlier, than in here. I went to school in New York, and I had to go right up to the last day. So I always tell students in Massachusetts they're very lucky. And so what our students did was, as long as they were in good standing at the end of their third term grades became their fourth term grades, which closed out their transcript, and then they started their internship full-time during school hours, or they could write a proposal where they were working, later or starting at 12 or, whatever. And then they checked in with an internship coordinator every single week, sometimes virtually, sometimes in person. And at the end of that, they had to provide a presentation, which we used to promote to our juniors to have them be part of that. And the last year, I think probably half of the class, the senior class, participated in the internship program. That was not tied necessarily to Innovation Pathways, but it was part of our NEASC work, which Reading is also involved in, and it was part of our Portrait of a Graduate work, so that students have this culminating experience. And when we look into dual enrollment, a lot of the community colleges around here, or even schools like Salem State, are looking to even have seniors on campus second half of their senior year taking classes. So that's a different project, but that could play into this as well, and that's how you make it happen. Obviously, it promotes students staying engaged until the end of their third term, then it gives them a real-life experience, and it really was rewarding, and the kids are pretty excited about doing it. And they were two separate things, but my theory was that would become the end of the Innovation Pathways. Did that answer all your questions?
Just the transportation piece.
Oh, the transportation. So I am thinking about that. Mainly our students in the previous district where I worked did drive, but that was part of the plan, is what is your transportation plan? And if they couldn't transport themselves to or from, we would either try to find somewhere that was closer, or we would figure out a means of transportation. And so that was something that was part of our plan, is how they were getting to and from.
Thank you.
Sarah?
Just two questions. I think you mentioned that there were no prerequisites necessarily for the earlier grade classes. What does that look like for the intro to engineering in terms of math? And are we shutting that out for a
So there
certain
will
number of
be
students?
co-requisites, and that's something I am working with the engineering teachers with. There are two engineering teachers at the high school. Does something have to be a prerequisite or co-requisite? A lot of other schools have co-requisites. So if you're in intro to engineering, you're also taking intro to physics and you're taking algebra, for example. That might be wrong, so don't quote me on that. But there could be, there isn't going to be something necessarily in the way. You could start with intro to physics and then go to intro to engineering design. If the Department of Ed does not approve my environmental engineering, that may shift a little bit, and it could be moved around just a tad.
And second half of my question, what does this look like? I think you mentioned the first grades will be classes of 26 and 27, so class of 26 is our current freshmen.
Yes.
What does this look like for them for completing the 4?
So when you start, the Department of Ed, when you kick this off, allows you to start with kids and have them only do a 3-year condensed. So one of those courses would go away, one of those years, and they would still do the capstone and an internship, but it would be just condensed into 3 years. So I would work with the department heads to really say, like, what is really necessary, because it would be very hard for them to squeeze 2 of those into 1 year, I think, with all the other classes they had to take.
Okay, thank you.
Tom?
So first of all, thank you for the interactivity in the questions. Sometimes, that can be hard, and you've handled it like a pro and then some. So
Thank you, Mr. White.
thank you, Jess. Sarah's question leads right to my question. Why are we cutting off sophomores if we're allowing them to do 3 years? And some of them may have already taken some of these classes that are listed in the first 2 years. For example, personal experience, my son took intro to engineering last year as a freshman. So theoretically, if we're going to say he only needs 3 years, he could do 2 more years his junior and senior year and have that 3 years. So is that something hard and fast from DESE? Is that something we're choosing? And would we reopen that consideration if that was the case?
It is something that's written in with DESE, but I can go back and ask them, if a student did take the first year already, could we allow them to enter? But yes, they ask you to focus on your incoming ninth graders and your current ninth graders, who will then next year obviously be 10th graders. But I had that thought actually when I was writing the grant, but I was trying not to get ahead of myself. So I will get an answer back to you.
There's a pretty large class of the current sophomores who took intro to engineering already as freshmen.
Yeah,
So
okay.
Mr.
Yeah,
Hatton would
check
know
it
them,
out. Yeah.
know them quite well.
So as you move into the detailed planning phase, I can tell you you're going to have a cohort of ready thought partners.
I love it. The more the merrier.
Lots of logistics, lots of logistical ideas.
Four high school parents sitting right here at the table.
Jada, go ahead.
On the issue of transportation and inclusion, how would METCO students be able to complete the internship requirement?
So there are a couple of things. If they wanted to complete the internship here in Reading, we could help them do that. But we can also partner with businesses that are closer to Boston, where they could actually use public transportation to and from. Or they could opt, obviously, to always do the capstone. But I will not lose pulse of all of those issues, because I think that is incredibly important to make sure that we're identifying those barriers to students being able to participate. And sometimes kids don't, or parents don't raise their hand and say, this is a problem for me. So I will try to think through those problems, but I'll probably need kids like you, Jada, even though I know you're leaving soon, to kind of highlight what some of those things might be, okay? All right.
Sure. I love that idea about possible partnerships in Boston too, and they can allow it to be a little more personalized too. So I like the idea. Do you mind speaking a little bit about, you mentioned a couple of certification and credential prep and things like that. I don't know if there's anything that have already, if this is again too far ahead, that's fine, but is there anything that has come up of potential certifications that will be of interest to students in any of these pathways or things like that could make them more sort of marketable as they enter the job?
So the ones that we're looking at, Dr. Milichewski, I'm working with, like I said, Dr. Mosier. His background and where he got his doctorate, I believe, and went to school was in St. Rose, which is actually in New York. I have a meeting with the department head from whence he came next week to talk about what those certifications might look like. I don't have a lot of knowledge about that, in terms of digital media or digital songwriting, but they tell me that there are certifications in that. Other examples that aren't in this pathway would be an Adobe certification, many computer certifications, and in the grant I actually included a whole list of engineering and manufacturing possible certifications that kids could work towards, and a lot of the community colleges have programs that students can work through to get certification to go, that are technical, but they're still earning college credits. And so I can furnish the grant. Don't be too critical if I have some, I was under the gun in finishing it, but I think it's well done, and but it breaks down some more of that detail. Okay. I think I already went over everything in here, so I'm going to move forward because I know you guys have a lot to do this evening. I also talked about this with the enhanced support from our guidance department. And here's just a visual of the partnerships that we have so far. And my goal is that this will expand significantly as we work through this planning year. But these are the industry partners and the community partners are 100% on board. I'm meeting with Middlesex Community College next week as well, in St. Rose as well, and then we have our computer science teacher working with UMass Lowell to pull them in, and just to kind of guide us as we have our advisory board meetings this year. So I think it's always nice to see like what has been done. There is a lot to do, but this is a list of what we've already accomplished this year as we've moved through the planning phase. There's another big section of the application to get designation that will be due in February. And like I said, after that, if we are giving the designation in the spring, it makes us eligible to apply for the planning grant, or the implementation grant, I'm sorry, that's up to $75,000. And that funding would become available is beginning of October is what the Department of Ed is telling me, next school year. Just in case anybody wants some light reading, there's some resources here for you to go into a lot of the things that I've referenced. And I think we already did this, but if anybody has any other questions.
A
Yes.
real-time illustration of how the evening has gone.
So again, thank you. It's great to see the grant applications that are there, but that leads me to the question of, okay, what is this going to cost us going forward, right? And I think it may depend upon some of the tracks and how they evolve. So it's one of those, please wait caller, might be your answer. But do you have any concept, especially based on your past experience, on what the run rate cost of something like this is, in addition to the base cost that we already have from a staff and whatnot perspective?
I think that the big initial costs are in the beginning. So you're looking to buy more computer equipment, more engineering equipment. One of the coolest things that we saw in Uxbridge, which it is not part of these pathways, but was a digital autopsy table. It was one of the coolest things I've ever seen, where you could flip around and use a scalpel, and it looked so real. But those kinds of things that wouldn't usually be in our school budget would be there. I am not missing that some of those things are going to need updating or new licenses, and so as to the best of my ability, that would be written into the grants for renewal for a certain period of time. Another idea that someone posed to me was the concept of leasing. One of our teachers came and said, you can lease or rent essentially equipment, especially equipment that takes up a lot of space. And so you have a running contract with a company to lease materials, and then you usually can get more of them for a short period of time, and then you kind of trade out as we go, and we don't need an entire warehouse for all of these things. And so I think that the Capital Skills Grant is another one that could have a lot of potential to purchase equipment. And I am working with Mr. Sullivan from ABC, the construction company. He has done capital skills grants or is working on one right now. And I also have some examples from other districts where I told people that I used to work with, please send them to me immediately so that I can use those as an example. And I'm going to pick people's brains about writing in renewals of, like a software license or something like that.
It says earmarks written all over it, too.
It does. There was two more questions. But, well, first, I guess an offer. We've heard a lot about how does this fit into the schedule, the graduation requirements, and we just went through graduation requirements policy last year and approved the updates. But if something comes out of this that needs us to go back and reconfigure that, please make sure you let us know so we can come back and consider it. Right? We don't want to be a blocker for this innovation. I would say, I'm speaking on behalf of all of us, I guess, to a degree, but if there's something in there that prevents us from moving forward with some of this, I think the six of us would want to make sure we are part of that conversation to help solve the problem if necessary.
Thank you. I definitely will.
The second thing is you have an engineering LLC of sorts that's already engaged here at the high school. The robotics team is technically an LLC. Are you engaging with them as part of this and this engineering? And I'm asking in particular because they and those students have to write a ton of grants to get a lot of that material. And I'm A, thinking that can be helpful to you, but B, could be competitive to you. So I want to make sure that there's synergies there, not competition.
So Mr. Strout and I have become best friends. We're divided by a cinder block wall, but I told him we could take that down so I could bother him all day long. But so he and I are working closely. He will be teaching some of those courses. We thought about putting in a robotics class, but we talked about just those very things, their timeline for their competition. Did that make sense, in the computer science? Was it too specific in the computer science pathway? And that's why we put in the environmental engineering. So we'll see. That could be tweaked. And he and I, we're also working on the scheduling committee together, so we spend a lot of quality time together. So don't worry, we're not going to miss anything.
Go ahead, Erin.
So related to Tom's questions, do you feel, does your committee feel we currently have enough teachers to implement this? That would be the main budget implication that I was thinking of.
So I don't think that the innovation pathways that are currently written, we use a lot of the courses we already have, or teachers that are already teaching a very similar course that could add that to their course load. And so I did that intentionally because I didn't want to come and ask for an additional FTE. That's not the intention of this. It's a reorganization of how you provide instruction and the options that you choose for, or you have for students. And it also plays to a lot of the strengths of our teachers that have raised their hand to say they want to be part of this. And so I don't, and DESE does not want innovation pathways necessarily driving hiring of additional FTEs. If that comes to it, if we have an explosion of interest in these pathways or other ones that we develop down the line, or maybe dual enrollment or something like that, it could be, but it also could be that we're changing how we do business, at the high school. I obviously am not Principal Tracy, but he and I have worked together. I've done a lot of this work in my previous district. I think there is a lot of creativity that is to be had in creating and setting up the schedule. So that doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to come and say we need additional FTEs.
Okay.
Full-time employees.
Yeah, I was mainly thinking about computer science. I feel like that's, and I could be misspeaking, but I thought part of the reason that we got down to just AP computer science was because we were having trouble hanging on to computer science teachers. Chuck Strout aside, who I know has
So
been
we
here a long
actually
time.
we have two computer science teachers, and that is part of what TEALS does. Is in my previous school, I had an engineering teacher and a math teacher that liked computers. TEALS came in, co-taught the classes with them. Not TEALS, but it was in what they call a volunteer from the industry would come in, and they were in the class every day. And so I think that Mr. Strout and Mr. McGowan, who are teaching the computer science classes now, they're beyond they can do intro to CS, but if we have other things, they could definitely help us or teach the teachers how to do other things. But Mr. McGowan's also the one that's teaching at UMass Lowell, so he's pretty well-versed as well.
Awesome.
You have another question?
Yeah, with the future inclusion of different innovation pathways, like the life sciences one, would you be able to apply for future funding then with this
Yes.
grant?
Yes,
Okay.
you can. Good question.
This is why we put this first on the agenda, because we thought it was very important that Jada be here for this discussion, so.
Jada's interviewed me a lot. I was in the newspaper. She and I have spent time together too.
I just want to thank Ms. Callahan, but also the rest of the high school. This has been like a total team. It's kind of
Yes,
ironic that you're
it
here.
absolutely is.
alone
I
tonight.
know.
It's been
They
like a
felt
total-
really bad, yeah.
A total team effort too, and Principal Tracy, Ms. Buckley's here, and just thank you for all your work. I think that this is a really exciting work for our community. I think I've been fortunate to be in a lot of schools that have moved forward with innovation pathways. We are not the first here in Massachusetts, if you look at the list. And just the idea of the real world connections, both in the school and out of the school, just the level of engagement for students, I think is just really exciting. And I think it really moves our school forward to the 21st century in some really new and innovative ways. And lastly, I love the community partnerships ideas too. So I think there's some really eager community partners that if we can tap into them are just amazing resource for our students. So thank you for this work, and I'm just really excited about what's ahead for the community here too.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Pass this on.
Okay, so we will move to public comment for anything that's not on the agenda. Oh, I should stop sharing. Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Is there a motion?
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Tom. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Oh, sorry,
Sorry.
there is discussion.
Sorry, I forgot. Allison Wright was one of the attendees at the last meeting, so she should be included on the attendee list.
Good catch. Any other discussion or amendments? Okay, so we'll take a vote on the consent agenda with the minutes as amended. All in favor? All opposed? That's 6-0 as amended. Okay, let's go to reports. Jada?
So we've just closed the first quarter here at RMHS, so we have had yesterday, being our official last day of grades for quarter one. So we'll be receiving report cards next week, I believe. We are entering November, which is typically a slower month at school. Some of you may know from the No School November nickname. We have 3 Fridays off in a row, I believe, so many students are kind of excited for this transitional period in our schedule.
It's a nice thing to call it.
We have just entered fall athletic season playoffs, so we have our field hockey, football, and soccer teams, I believe, are the 4 teams that have made it, and we have volleyball as well. And swimming has their competition this weekend. And we're all cheering for them to do well. And we have a robotics presentation next week, which will be a Rube Goldberg machine that we are all kind of excited and concerned for. And it's kind of a transitional period at the high school right now.
Very good, thank you. Dr. Hardy.
Hi, everyone. I have 2 updates for you this evening. First, I wanted to just fill you in a little bit on our work this year regarding mentoring and induction. As you know, in the Reading Public Schools, we pride ourselves on hiring the highest quality staff to work with our students, and retention, of course, is very important. We also understand that we have an obligation for continual professional learning for our staff, and this is especially important for new staff coming in. Not only do we want to support them in the transition into their roles, we also want to bring them on board with the Reading philosophy and kind of understanding how our district functions and the expectations that we have. In broad strokes, our program has 3 major components. The first occurring in the summer, where we have a week-long new staff induction. That's an opportunity for a lot of district-wide meetings, reviewing of policies, mandated trainings, and just introducing staff to each other and to the important people in our district. The other piece that is ongoing is our mentoring program. So all of our new staff do receive a mentor that meets with them regularly, and that really supports individually in their role. It could be as detailed as helping them with lesson plannings. There's observations that happen between the mentor and the mentee, and problems of practice, conversations about how to support a particular student or how to interact with the family. So we know that those relationships are really important. Something that's new this year is that we did add a layer in for our year 2 staff that wasn't previously in place. So we have created some mentor cohorts, and we have some outstanding Reading teachers that are acting as mentors to those cohorts, and they're meeting on a regular basis. We also have a professional text that they're reading, and then other professional development. That's one of our obligations. Staff who are working from their initial to their professional license are required to have 50 hours of mentoring above and beyond that first year. And so this is our way of meeting that obligation, but also really providing some differentiated support for staff who are in their 2nd and 3rd year. Also new this year, the 3rd component of our program is we have a new staff development series. And so this is a series of meetings where we bring our new staff together. We're including our year 2 staff as well, really for 2 purposes. One is for some specific professional learning that we think is important to come into the Reading culture, and then also to help them have a space where they can talk to each other and to develop relationships, have a chance to seek feedback, hear what's happening with other people, express concerns that they have. Most recently, we met last Monday for our 2nd meeting in the series, and that meeting was focused on developing high-quality relationships with families. And we actually were able to use one of our community resources, Teresa Wiggins, who is a consultant that works with families, came in and spoke to our new staff really about like the ways that you connect with families and the importance of it. And we were able to give the new staff time to talk about some of the challenges they're facing and to seek some supports from myself and Teresa and also from within the group. And so that is just our second meeting. We have a few more scheduled throughout the year. And then we, as we go, we're collecting feedback from our new staff so we can continually develop that program with it being new and making sure that it's truly meeting their needs. And so we'll continue to assess that. So that's something exciting that's happening this year that I wanted to fill you in on. I have one other item I wanted to mention this evening. Something else that's happened over the last month or so that's exciting is we've launched a new assessment system at the middle school levels. It's called iReady. That's the company that we chose to work with. And basically it's a diagnostic that looks at students in grades 6, 7, and 8. They take an assessment in the areas both of reading and math. The first time through was a lot of work to arrange the logistics. The first time you do anything, you're learning as you go. I was really proud of the leadership of our middle school principals and our middle school staff for the way that they stepped up and tried something new. And we definitely learned some lessons as far as how to improve and streamline implementation the next time. Right now, we're currently in the giving the opportunities first dive into the data. We just very recently had a training with our principals, our curriculum coordinators, and our curriculum leads at the middle school level to learn about the platform, the different reports we can run, and how we can start to dive in to the student data. That information is then going to be spread down to the teachers, and they'll have an opportunity to participate in training as well. So it's exciting. We're taking the first few steps, but I feel confident that this is really what we need to do in order to be monitoring the trends at our middle school and to understand what areas of improvement are needed, how to support our teachers, and most importantly, what our students need. Be happy to answer any questions you have.
So I confess, I'm the only parent here of a middle schooler who mentioned going through the assessment. So I'm curious, will students learn how they did on it, and will families learn, particularly, if there are gaps for a child?
It's a great question and a really important one. Absolutely, we think that this is a tool that will allow us to better communicate with families and students. Right now, the first step is for teachers to really understand what they're looking at so that they can speak with confidence to families, and also for us to ensure that we have the right supports and interventions and steps to take based on the results we're seeing. Another piece of the first implementation is to kind of calibrate the results and make sure that what we're seeing matches what we know of the students as well. Obviously, there's always a few snafus that you run into with the assessments, and that's one of the things that we've been analyzing. Perhaps students that went through the assessment very quickly are those valid results. How do these results, match up to what we know from other things that we're looking at? But absolutely, this is meant to be a powerful tool for communication with families and absolutely with students too. That's part of the plan that we're still in process of developing, but it's one of the reasons also why we are using this type of assessment.
Okay. Partly I asked, my son mentioned a score, and I said, well, out of what? I don't know. Well, what does the score mean? I don't know. So I was like, that's a meaningless number. And how many times a year will they be assessed?
Currently, we're planning on 3 times a year.
Okay.
Took a little bit longer the first time as students went through, but from talking with some folks in other districts who have implemented, they said that's common, and that as students become accustomed to the platform and the format, that they will move along a little quicker. One of the things I really like about iReady is that they recognize that it takes a while for students to get through it, and there's these little brain breaks as the kids go. It almost is like a little mini video game that's just maybe 30 seconds long at different intervals, just to keep them engaged, and we hope that that will improve the student outcomes, that they'll be able to stay focused.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. I have a question on the mentoring program, a question on the mentoring program. I'm really happy to hear about the addition of year 2. Did you say that in this a situation where someone may need 3 years, you could do that, or you're,
Yeah.
because I mean, PTS is so important that the right people
Yeah,
get that,
absolutely.
you know.
So our intention is that we will support staff in years 2 and then into year 3 as necessary for the 50 hours. We have, created logs, so the staff in year 2 are starting to gather that mentoring time. It's time they spend with their mentor, time they spend in the professional text in professional development. If they do not reach the 50 hours at the end of this school year, we will continue to support them in year 3. And of course, we'll talk about like how to continue to support them going on, but specifically around gathering those hours that they require to advance their license, we absolutely will continue that into year 3.
Yeah, I'm really happy you reported on that. That's so important, that we provide that support to the new teachers.
It's been exciting work, and I should mention that it isn't something that I created on my own, that I had a committee of teachers who really have been working on mentoring and induction in Reading Public Schools for a while. And so they really understood kind of what was working and what wasn't. And also as part of the Professional Development Committee that met a few times last year. So it really was a team effort to update the program and make sure it, as best we can, we're meeting the needs of our new teachers, knowing we're going to have to continually refine.
I'm going to jump back to the iReady. Do we know how correlated it is to the mass standards? And have we seen any, correlation metrics between the results of iReady and, say, MCAS? Not from our testing, but, from other studies.
Let me look into that one directly. I do know that it is correlated to the Common Core standards. And so as you go into the platform, you're able to go in and see specifically how it relates back. As far as how it correlates to MCAS, I haven't seen that. That doesn't mean it's not there, but I'm happy to dig in a little and let you know.
Great. Thank you. Ms. Baton?
Well, we'd like to invite the community to our next 2 Killam Elementary School visits. Tomorrow afternoon, Friday afternoon at 1 p.m., and Saturday morning at 8 a.m. We'd love for the community to come out and walk through the Killam Elementary School in preparation for the town meeting coming up on November 13th. Do I have the date right? 14th. Warrant Article 7 requests $2.2 million to invest in accelerating our MSBA project from Phase 1 to Phase 2, which is scope definition. And we would like to tour the community, have Mr. Huggins, our Director of Facilities, Principal Levesque, share with the community many of the physical plant and programmatic issues that we're facing in that particular building, and why a yes vote for this warrant article is important in order to move the project forward.
And those tours, again, just to emphasize there, so for the town meeting members only, right, this round is tomorrow 1, and then Saturday at 8 a.m. And we did already have one last week, which was attended by about 25 people, we would say, as well. Great.
Thank you. Dr. Milczewski?
Just one quick up, just as a shout out to, would just like to congratulate Monica Acker. I don't know if anyone knows Monica in our community, which is really exciting, both an RPS parent, and I'm announcing this because she's also a Wood End tutor. Just was launching her first published children's book, Brave Like Mom. And it says here that the book is a touching story about a girl whose mom has a chronic illness and how she is brave just like her mom. There's been a couple of articles about it in the local press I think are just really touching, and I think when you read sort of the content of why Monica wrote the text and the impact and sort of in her own story, I think is really powerful. So I think it's going to be a really powerful text for our kids too, and I think we're proud that it's one of our staff members who wrote that. So just a huge shout out to Monica. And then also like to give a thanks to Tom. Why? So today, Tom and I went to the MASC joint conference in Hyannis, and I was on a panel that Tom stepped up to moderate for the group too, around superintendent leadership entry in the community. So I think Tom did a great job moderating the panel and representing the community and the committee well. So thank you for making the drive down and finding the time.
Back and forth in one day.
One day.
I'll just make a plug as well. Mrs. Zacker's book is having a launch party tomorrow evening at 7 at Whitelam, if anybody would like to attend. So, Thank you. Okay, liaison reports, we will start with Chuck.
So I talked to everybody about the Recreation Committee meeting at our last meeting. We met again on Monday to vote on the requests by the pickleball community to line the Bancroft courts, and as well as the Washington Park court. At that previous meeting, we had a lot of presentations of for and against, but I think the one that stuck with most of us was the Chris Saratani, who's the varsity tennis coach, kind of obviously spoke very thoughtfully for, the emergence of pickleball, but really didn't want us to put things down that could potentially damage the Bancroft courts, that being tape or whatever. So the committee ultimately voted to not do anything with Bancroft, but to allow the pickleball folks to use chalk lines on the Washington Street courts. So that's where and that's our recommendation to the board of select board to ultimately decide on that. The coalition we met on Wednesday afternoon, and it was predominantly a report by Erica, and what struck me from the report is just it's really, I think as far back as it goes, the biggest emphasis with the schools was the youth risk YRBS, and the amount of work that they're doing with the schools now is just unbelievable, and the working relationship she has with the central office staff, I think particularly Jen, and it was really great to hear all the work they're doing. And she also gave a shout out, as did you, to NEMLEC for their work with our community a couple weeks ago. And, one other final thing. You should see now we've posted, with the help of Susan and Carla helped me get the Halcroft track event posted. The speakers were chosen by Mr. McFadden, and he had asked me to say some words kind of to introduce people and just talk a little bit about Hal. So that's going to be a week from tomorrow on Veterans Day, immediately following the Vietnam Wall presentation up at the front of the campus. We're just going to move down to the field. It should be about 12:15 or so. So it should be, I know Hal's well respected. I'm sure there'll be a lot of people there.
Sarah?
We had the RCTV annual meeting last week. It was the ice cream social. That's the only thing I have to report, that the ice cream was really good. And we did have some RMHS students who were involved in RCTV. They're helping to serve the ice cream and socialize. And so it was just a good time to see everybody. And so don't try to steal my liaison committee assignment. Thank you.
I was on that committee during COVID. There was no ice cream.
Erin?
So no new meetings. Again, CPAC will meet next on Tuesday night, and it's virtual. It's the Parents' Rights Workshop. And the next pair meeting is next Wednesday night. Right? Am I getting the dates right? I don't even know what day it is. 6 o'clock. I believe it's next week. But I did want to mention, I had the opportunity to attend the first Reading Reflects last night with Lieutenant Silva of the Reading Police Department, who is their civil rights officer, and Dr. Chatterjee, who is the Director of Equity and Social Justice. And it was a really nice event, just sort of an opportunity to learn more about both of them as people, but also more about their roles within the community and the work they're doing together and on behalf of the community. And I believe they're planning more events in the Reading Reflect series, so hopefully more people can come out and check it out.
Many of us were there, but we had the financial forum last Wednesday, October 26th. There was the final presentation of the ARPA committee. That was after, I think, Select Board did their final approval, so all of the ARPA money has been finally approved for Select Board so far. There was also a presentation on the Recalc Committee and all the work they've done, of which we've since followed up a little bit to see, because there was some thing that came out of that about seniors and connection and potentially wanting to be involved in schools. So we're reaching out to see if they want to be part of, tutoring or paras or anything else from an openings perspective that we have. And John O'Neill's helping, I think, with that as we work through that. So that was great to see that connection kind of come to life, almost instantaneously. Then we spent a lot of time talking through Killam, which most of the people here know that was more of a discussion about what gotchas and how should we present things and making sure we work through that kind of fun stuff. So that's really it from a liaison perspective. I will, Dr. Milichewski, thanked me, but really he was the star of the show. So, it was great to see our superintendent there representing Reading and, speaking to the work. And it was, his work was emblematic of exactly what should have been done and the way he connected with the community and heard the feedback and then synthesized it and pushed it back out, and working with Dr. Hardy and Ms. Baton and the rest of the team, the we, right, instead of the I. And, so I think that just further demonstrates that we've got the right team for the job, so.
Good. Carla?
I was going to mention Killam, but it was covered, and I attended last night Reading Reflect as well. I would say there was about 60 attendees there, and Erica McNamara was the moderator. She did a great job. Big shout out to the Joshua Eaton community this morning. Sean and Tom and I were able to attend their Veterans Day celebration, and honestly, it was like a Broadway presentation. It set my day up. Like, it was, the kids performed, the singing state trooper, I've heard him before, but never saw the show. The veterans were happy. The school was decorated beautifully. It was an unbelievable event, and it just set me up for a really good day.
He has to be going on at least 20 years of coming here. So.
19, this was the 19th year that they've done it, yeah.
He's unbelievable.
23rd.
They started it 23 years ago, but they've only done it 19 years, so.
Yeah, I have no report. I was just going to say much the same as Carla. It was just a fantastic experience to be able to attend the Eaton Veterans Day celebration. So thank you to Ms. Shelburne and the planning committee there for inviting us and putting that on. It was fantastic. And I learned that the singing trooper can sing 32 national anthems in their native language, which is impressive, to say the least. So, but I think there were probably 25 or 30 vets there, I would say. Good turnout as well. So it was a great event. So, okay. Now on to our regular agenda. We will start with, I guess it's not really the beginning of our regular agenda, but next item anyway is superintendent goals. So Dr. Milichewski, I will hand it to you. Great.
Do you want to pull it up on the Google Doc, or do you want Andy to?
I don't know if I can get to the Google Doc from here, actually. It's like, can't get into my email. Yeah, maybe if we can get it. Does Andy have the link?
I'll give it to him right now.
Okay. Andy, we're going to get you a link if you could share. We're going to send you a link if you could share. It's just a Google Doc that I don't think we had teed up here. Great.
It says at the top, wow, this doc has changed a lot. Sync to the latest version. I've never seen that before.
Oh, is that Google Docs remarking about the number of changes?
Should be all set, Andy, when you. Guessing Andy just jumped in as the anonymous giraffe in the Google Doc, is my guess. Or the anonymous, wow, a lot of,
I'm the pumpkin.
That's all of us.
I think I'm the
open it too.
pumpkin.
the anonymous Dumbo octopus. One of those you, Andy?
Anonymous pumpkin.
You know, I can, there you go.
There we go. Perfect. So, thank you. And while Andy's pulling it up, just a little bit of context for those who weren't joined in the last meeting. So, the last meeting, I asked the committee for a little bit of just direction setting on where I was going with my superintendent goals for 2022, 2023. Gave some sample or some draft areas of focus, got some feedback from the committee, and then also, therefore, incorporate that feedback for what I'm going to share tonight. So, as you'll see on the screen, the four goal areas are still the same four that I presented the other night. But what I did was I went back and outlined some of the key actions and the benchmarks in there for more clarity for the committee. So, first goal, goal 1 around district improvement goal. And district strategic plan, the goal is to design and publish a multi-year district strategic plan by June 30th, 2023. So as we as the community knows, this past year, we just updated the existing strategic plan for this last 1 year of the plan, and then commit to having a larger multi-year strategic plan that outlines the work ahead. You'll see some of the key actions in there include organizing all the different reports and data information that we have in front of us that I think we've been presenting over the past year and a half, from superintendent entry plan, DESE district review, special education program reviews, and that should help us to put together an outline of where we're going. Collaborate with our team to then map out the specific objectives, initiatives, and outcomes within that strategic plan. A big piece, which I think is really important, and I think Erin spoke this last time, is to gather feedback from RPS stakeholders around that draft version to make sure it reflects where the community believes we should be heading and moving forward. And then lastly, to publish that district strategic plan through the various district communication channels. A couple of benchmarks along the way the first one is by February 28th, is to at least provide the committee with an outline of what are all those themes organized. Not to have the specific, actions that will lead us to those larger themes, but again, just have the themes outlined within a draft. Then by May 15th, actually have a first draft of district strategic plan to present. It looks like a quick turnaround because it's June 1st. It says to get feedback on that from staff, students, and families, but those processes are probably going to overlap by the, creating the draft version and getting feedback, and then present by June 30th at the latest. That way we have a strategic plan up and running before the summer and help to guide the work ahead for the year. Sean, do you prefer if I go through them all one at a time, or if I go through them all first?
I don't know, does anybody have a preference? I'm not seeing anybody jumping out of their seats for feedback right now, so why don't we just keep going?
All right, so Andy, you can go down to goal number 2 then. So goal number 2, I think, was the kind of a trickier one to try to categorize. This is also a district improvement goal around innovations. Thank you. I think, Sarah, that was your phrase from last time. This is to prioritize, address, and or create paths forward to address structural and systemic issues, themes, dilemmas, outline the superintendent entry report of findings, including, and here's where we have a big bag of different things, from elementary half-day, secondary math pathways, school schedules, RMHS innovation pathways, middle school literacy curriculum, elementary musical programming, mostly like a strings program, full-day kindergarten, and community partnerships. So I think those are things that I've elevated in my entry report, or we've talked about from time to time. And you'll see in the key actions, what we're going to try to do this year is, as we move forward, is to try to prioritize 2 or 3 that we can focus on. And these are 2 or 3 that we feel like we can actually make some significant headway this year. Some people may be wondering, well, why don't we just choose those 2 or 3 now? I think at some level, we're trying to move all of these forward, but we don't quite know. There's going to have to be some prioritization as we move into the budget process. So I think we're still, as a team, trying to figure out which ones we can gain traction on. So I don't think we're quite at a place yet where we can say these are our 2 or 3 that are really the ones that we're can commit to in full steam. But then within each of these, there's the process of creating collaborative teams to look at, to calibrate on these issues and then determine paths forward. So as you already see, we already have a team in place for innovation pathways. But similarly, we also have a team in place for secondary math pathways. So we're starting to put teams around each of these core issues, and the teams are starting to move the work forward. Ensure that each of the teams defines a problem statement. We should be very clear with the community what actually we're trying to solve within each of these areas. What are we trying to achieve? And then what are some of the ways to move us forward? As you can probably see, those are some of the steps that they're going to have kind of set the stage for what's going to come in the strategic plan. So if these teams are able to outline, here's the 5 or 6 things we need to do to move from here to there, that's kind of giving us what we'll need to put within our district strategic plan. And then, of course, engage with the community around these themes to make sure that the work we're doing aligns to larger community perspectives and ideas. Some timelines on that. Oh, and then again, make sure that those that we didn't address or resolve this year are reflected within our district strategic plan, and map out sort of a timeline. The strategic plan should have a timeline for us to try to, map out how we're going to resolve each of these issues over the next several years. Some of the benchmarks include a update of my formative evaluation around what are the 2 or 3 themes that we've selected. Also then between the formative and the summative to provide updates to school committee on all of the themes, including those that weren't selected, just about what some of the collaborative teams are doing and what's ahead. And then at the summative evaluation to provide an update on all the themes, with each including what I described before, the problem statement, the ideal outcomes, and the action steps that are required to move forward, and then to make sure that all of that is reflected within our district strategic plan. Shifting gears into a goal that I had, similar to goals last year, was around coaching, developing, supporting principals. The goal this year, the language last year was around like researching, designing, and implementing, with really a focus on research and designing. And this year we're focusing on the implementing a district strategy for coaching, supporting, and develop principal talent. Some of the things that our team is doing is to implement structures under Key Action 1 that reflect best practices for coaching, supporting, and developing principals that align to Reading context. I think we're in the process of doing that right now, and onboard leaders with that. Building partnerships with some educational tech leadership organizations or groups to help us support our strategy. Select a focus area for our principal leadership and align all of our PD and support and resources to that focus area. And then the one that I think is most important for us this year, which I don't think we did enough of last year, is just consistently monitor our progress and effectiveness to drive adjustments in the strategy or approach. So some of the things that we're trying to kind of assess what we're doing is and how we're doing. One is to look at sort of, for the committee to have an analysis of some of the agendas and protocols and resources that we're using. Around that's for process. Another process related one is to get some formative feedback through ongoing principal surveys addressing the impact of the strategy on student learning. It's also helpful that knowing we have a partnership with Salem State. Salem State's trying to collect all this data anyways to see what their impact is in our work. So we're kind of working hand in hand with them on this data collection. Interviews with principals and how this is working. And then also, I think now we're at a point where we have some really good data systems in front of us now, whether it's our common assessment data, student work samples, which we look at within our ILTs, other student growth measures, rubrics from teacher instructional practices. I think our team is starting to put some things in place that we can use to measure the impact that this work is having on students. And then lastly, I think the most dull and kind of boring goal is just I'll have this goal again next year. This is required through new superintendent induction program. We're about halfway through towards graduation. And goal 4, so this is to develop skills in strategy development, data analysis, equity, and instructional leadership by actively engaging in the second year of the new superintendent induction program. So I did not write that goal. That's just sort of the expectation from the program that's one of my goals around my own professional practice. And on that, as you know, I am lucky to have the support of Chris McGrath as my superintendent coach again. And Chris has been wonderful. Chris is, in all of our, so many of our leadership team meetings, we joke that some days Chris comes and just hops right in and joins in with our team and is a great resource, thought partner, and push for me and my practice. So I appreciate NISSIP providing that resource as well. So I'll pause there just for any questions or concerns or feedback.
I know we've all had a chance to weigh in independently, so any other feedback? No? Okay, do we want to speak about the focus indicators briefly as well?
Sure, we open those up.
Sorry, didn't mean to put you on the spot.
No, it's good.
But I think our motion technically is going to encompass the focus indicators, so.
It should. All right, so the second part of this conversation, as you know, that DESE recommends that superintendents and school committees choose 6 to 8 focus indicators that are where the superintendent will be evaluated on. Given that it just would be extremely cumbersome to have to sort of give a rating within all of the different indicators. So last year we went through this process too and identified a handful of indicators that we used for your ratings. A couple of things that DESE said that these should be aligned to just what the district thinks is like the work that's ahead, and also that they think reflects sort of what also the breadth of what that standard really entails as well. So the ones that I'm proposing for today is first 1B, instruction. So you can, if those at home have opened the superintendent rubric, you can see the language in there as well. There are so many instruction-related items happening. I mean, Dr. Hardy hit on a couple of them tonight around curriculum, assessment, PD support. That's a pretty broad bucket that I think that can encompass sort of all of the work happening within instruction. The second indicator is 2C, which is called scheduling and management information systems. And the rationale on this is we know that the high school spoke a little bit about actively exploring and looking at high school schedule. Our middle schools are also currently right now going through training and support with district management group to look at their schedule. And as you know, we've been working with our elementary principals and also our union around the elementary half day. So there's just a lot happening around some of those scheduling pieces. I think will be important to kind of continue to update the community on that. That one I'm less convinced on needs to stay, but I put it out there given those pieces, but also so much of that work is happening through others too. So that one I could go back and forth on. 2E, fiscal systems. So the rationale being that this is we think a really critical budget year, especially with some of the interesting contextual factors. We know that we have the ESSER cliff, as you may call it, with some things falling off the ESSER grant. We have a lot of different priorities that are ahead for us. We're looking at scheduling, which also means we're looking at student groupings. I think there's a lot going on, a lot that we'll discuss in the budget process. So I think it's important that that's sort of a focus for us. And I also want to say that some feedback Chuck provided too is that I didn't put in here too, I think the indicators 2B around human resources and management, that a lot of times these are going hand in hand, like talking about fiscal systems and also talking about just our staffing resources. So that may be another one to consider as well, 2B. Under 3C, communication. I think that's just, again, a really broad indicator that can encompass a lot of the work around family and community engagement. And then 4, the 2 and 4 are commitment to high standards. I think that should always be a indicator for us. I think that one should be there for forever. Is that I think that placing equity and excellence at the core is important in all of our improvement efforts. So I think I need to be held to that bar, and that should be a focus area. And 4E for me is really important this year around shared vision. Around as we're embarking on a new district strategic plan. I think our team has done a lot of work around and outlining for the community a lot of the different things that we feel where our community could go. Now it's important that we also have that same shared vision around sort of what's the path to get there. So I think that is an important one given the context that we're in. So for those keeping score at home, that's 1B, 2B potentially. So 1B instruction, 2B human management, human resources, 2C scheduling and management, 2E fiscal systems, 3C communication, 4A commitment to high standards, and 4E shared vision. Open to any thoughts or feedback.
Oh, I guess I don't have to raise my hand. Tom, you can go first though.
So, first of all, a lot of thought went into those, so thank you for that. My first inclination as I think through this is I remember last year we had this conversation, and I feel like there was a coalescence last year that said, okay, we're comfortable with 6 or 8 last year because it was your first year, but ultimately you're responsible for all of those, and are we comfortable with only 6 or 8 on a go-forward basis? I'm not sure that I'm comfortable with 6 or 8 on a go-forward basis. I don't know that I necessarily need all of them either, so maybe I'm somewhere a little bit further than 6 or 8, but not all 20. And I feel like there's some that are specific to the goals that we have this year that could be added to this to make it more complete. For example, I have a hard time with us excluding assessment, which is, 1C, right? When that is a core need we've talked about from last year, and it's happening with iReady, it's happening with IRLA, it's happening with other things this year. But we really need to make sure that we understand those assessments, we're executing them, they're helping inform instruction, et cetera. So I have a hard time with us excluding that because it ties back with so much more. I understand you probably did because there's so many you're trying to limit down to 6 or 8. So I hear that. In a similar vein, I have a hard time excluding evaluation. And the reason I have a hard time excluding that is because we have the principal coaching as your third goal, right? And part of that is going to come into the evaluation process, not just the help that Salem State is providing us, but how are you coaching them, especially with so many of them that are new? and we have 2 that have been here for more than 2 years, right? So their evaluation, their process, their engagement with you is going to be critical for their growth and for the growth of the district. We only go as quickly as our principals go in the grand scheme of things. So I have a hard time saying that we shouldn't do evaluation. Somewhat aligned to assessment, but I could be convinced to exclude it because of assessment, is data-informed decision-making. But I feel like if we're not making the decisions based upon the data we're receiving, we have a problem. I think it's pretty something standard you do by nature, your team does by nature, but it's part of our assessment, it's part of tying assessment back towards it, it's part of the instruction and the curriculum that we're implementing. I passed over curriculum because we've made a lot of choices already. We don't have a lot of curriculum choices to make right now. Maybe middle school, ELA, but that's why I skipped that one. The next one I have a problem with is 2A, which is environment. Our number 1 district goal is our students and making sure they feel safe and supported in the school space, right? That they feel connected. So how can we skip that as part of the assessment for you as part of this process, right? That's a disconnect for me between that district goal and the environment side. Now, I know your goal doesn't say that, but the district goal does say that, and you're enabling the district goal as part of that. So those are 4 that I think I would propose we add. I've gone down through the other list. I can be comfortable with some of the other ones being out there. I could always argue for a lot of them being in there. But I'm trying to find my way towards, ultimately, as a 3rd, 4th, 5th year superintendent, I expect you're going to have all 20 as something. So I'm trying to step it up in my head, say we're stepping up what we're grading you against. But of course, I'm just one person, so I don't know if that makes sense to anybody else or not, so.
Yeah, and to me, I have no preference to whether it's 6 or 21. It doesn't matter to me. I think a lot of times, like for example, under instructional work, 1B, I would probably be fitting like evidence of assessment, evaluation under instruction, like sort of funneling it in there. So whether we parse it out as multiple or have it that one, it's fine with me. And so if the committee is more comfortable with something in the middle or all 21, I have no preference.
So, I'm trying to figure out how hard and fast this is. But the decision to go to 6 to 8 wasn't, I have a little bit of a different memory about how we got there, about it being Dr. Milczewski's first year. It's pretty well prescribed by DESE to use the model, I forget what it's called, but the model assessment framework for administrators, which does prescribe 6 to 8 focus indicators. Now, the conversation that we had is that they're focus indicators, doesn't mean you're not allowed to evaluate and consider the others, right? But I think it's prescribed. The conversation that I recall from last year was we anticipated that as we saw Dr. Milczewski in the role, as new goals emerged as priorities, as new maybe developmental opportunities for him emerged as priorities, that would inform which focus indicators we chose in 1 year, over the versus the last. But I don't see the value in choosing a subset that is like the majority or a significant majority of the whole list. I see the value in choosing a subset that are the focus indicators for a reason, but again, it doesn't preclude us from evaluating the others. Now, I will say, there are 2 that I agree with you, there are 2 that I really agree with you, and I would rather go to 8 than 6, because we have a lot on our plates, but data-informed decision-making and environment, I viewed environment a little bit differently. I think we've talked a lot about common processes and things like that. And, across the district, we have a common district handbook now. We're making improvements in food services and accomplishing what we need to accomplish for Killam, fits into this bucket from my perspective. And that's, if there's, we have a lot of things that we need to get done, but like moving the ball forward on Killam successfully is very high on that list in my mind. So I would agree with you that 2A, I think is one that belongs on there, whether we have 8 or 12 or 21 or whatever. But I'm not in a place where I think it makes sense for us to go to 10 or 12 or more as focus indicators. I think we should stick with the 6 to 8 that's sort of dictated by the model framework. What thoughts others have?
Just to quickly address that last part. I think it gives you kind of the option, right? It doesn't, I wouldn't say it's as prescriptive from my reading of it. In fact, we argued against it in the past, right? And chose in the past to go for the whole thing as opposed to going to the focused indicators. So it's frankly, it's easier for us as well if we do the focused indicators, right? It's a lot easier. I think we probably all saw that last May. If we do the focused indicators too. I just have a hard time, and I don't think I'm alone, but maybe I am. I have a hard time with so many of so many areas that we are already focusing on to then say they're not focus indicators as well. So maybe there's a happy medium. Maybe it's 10. Maybe it's 8. I don't think I want to throw any of the ones that have already been chosen out. And maybe I can come down to 2, but I think Chuck already added 1 more, so we're up to 7 already. So, what do we want to do here in terms of that regard? I could go to 10 and say 10 is a good number, but again, if nobody else is on the same page, then so be it. It is what it is.
Okay, go ahead, Chuck.
How does that affect, would we decide tonight to vote or to add and then vote? Because we're voting on this tonight, correct?
We could, we could also table the vote and come back to it.
Because, I think that
We're going to have a busy
if we're
agenda.
going
on
to
December
start
1st.
adding, I think we need to give the superintendent the opportunity to reflect on it, on his time versus agreeing to it right here tonight.
Go ahead.
So just to counter that, Chuck, right? I think, and somewhat to what Dr. Milczewski is saying, he's doing a lot of these things already. It's just a matter of whether we rate him.
And we're gonna, if we're doing our jobs and our evaluation, are gonna comment on them whether they're indicated or not.
Evidence shows that's not the truth, right? We didn't. None of us did, right, last time. So we focused almost exclusively to a person. I think you added 1 or 2, right? But almost exclusively to the focused indicators last time.
But what you choose to comment on and write about, whatever, often could fit into multiple buckets, right? So where we each have individual priorities or individual things that we're reflecting on, I think, I'm not going to say we shoehorned them in. I think just it's the nature of the rubric that there are things that fit into multiple buckets, right? So that's why I personally don't lose sleep over not having 10 things to evaluate or 12 things or 21 things to evaluate. Because I think, again, with the exception of sort of like moving the ball forward on Killam, which I think probably fits into 2A, most of what we sort of view as priorities and goals could be addressed through, 1 or more of these that have already been identified. Just one opinion.
So I guess, if we have, I guess you added it, I don't know if it was agreed, but if we are agreeing to add human resources management and development, then I suppose we could take evaluation from my addition off, because my reason is pretty, could fit into that bucket pretty easily, right, with regards to, the principal training and process there, as well as the new induction stuff that, Sarah went through, as well as all the stuff that Michelle's working on and things like that. So if you want to say that, then I'm happy to take evaluation off the table as one that I think should be included. I could come to the same pace with data-informed decisions. It's a little bit too generic for me if I were to choose between assessment and data-informed decisions. Assessment is an absolute weakness from everything I hear and everything I'm being told, and something that we know we're focusing on. I would prefer assessment over data-informed decision if I had to horse trade, for lack of a better way to say it.
I find this interesting because I feel like assessment's a prerequisite to data-informed decision-making. So if we make the focus indicator data-informed decision-making, for instance, you almost have to achieve a level of success in assessment to be able to.
Not necessarily. You can use data-informed decision in many other things, right? We're informing the strategic plan with data that we collected from all the community. That Dr. Milczewski collected from the community. That's not student impacting, right? You can do a lot of things from a data-informed decision-making that does not impact the classroom. Assessment is directly impacting from a classroom perspective. And I think I'm trying to tie it back to that, and I guess the personal importance I'm putting on that. But again, it's just one person, so if I'm all by myself, I'm all by myself.
Yeah, good.
You're not by yourself. I like the idea of assessment only because I feel like that's where we're at. Like, I feel like we're at the point where we've introduced all these new assessments, and not that you're not going to be making data-informed decisions based on that, but I feel like Sean said, I do see assessment in some ways as a precursor to data-informed decision-making, and I feel like we're at the point where we're introducing these new assessments, as Sarah said, you know, we're figuring out how to dive into that data, what to do with that data, and how then that's going to impact teaching and learning in our classrooms, right? So I like the idea of adding in 1C, the assessment, for that reason, because I do feel like it's a focus. That being said, I would really like to see environment. I think that we've made social and emotional well-being like a huge focus this year, and it seems like a miss not to put that in there. You're doing the work, and it's been identified already as a district focus and priority. So, and I agree with Sean, a lot falls under environment, right? It's a lot of pieces, but that one in particular stands out for me. But I guess that would bring us up to 9. I could get behind 9.
I mean, I guess I don't really care either way. I'd prefer that we not do, I'm not evaluated on all of the goals for my entire company, or everything in my job. Like, it's focused on what are the biggest indicators of success, and for some of these buckets, to me, it's so intertwined. If you pick one, you're doing the others. So I think it's fine to include assessment and environment. I don't have a strong feeling about it.
Carla, any thoughts?
I'm kind of with Sarah on that. I'm fine with I'm fine with either the assessment or the data-informed decision-making, because I think they're so closely intertwined that we're going to talk about them anyways.
So what I'm hearing, the current offer on the table, I suppose, is to include assessment, environment, and HR management development. Is that what maybe there's some coalescence around, which would leave us at 9?
That was already in there.
It was added late, but yeah.
2B?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Right, but it wasn't one of the 6, the initial 6. So that would leave us at 9.
I can get comfortable with that.
So the last two we added were
1C,
1C
assessment,
and 2A.
and 2A, environment.
Okay. And we're striking 1E, data-informed decision.
I don't think we had 1E. We didn't have 1E before. Well, I mean, we talked about it now, but it wasn't sort of on the list to begin with. Dr. Milashevsky, what are your thoughts on, are you comfortable with 9? Okay.
He's like, I'm doing the work out of it, so.
Let's read to make sure we're all on the same page what someone has as the 9.
Yeah, so I have 1B, instruction. We just added 1C, assessment. We would have 2A, environment. 2B, HR management development. 2C, scheduling and management information systems. I just closed the tab that had the other ones. 2E, fiscal systems. And what was there from 3? 3C, communication, thank you.
And 4A and 4E.
And there's a whole nother page that I didn't scroll to. Sorry, I misclicked and closed the tab. It had 4A and 4E. Oh, yeah, right. 4A, commitment to high standards, and 4E, shared vision. Right.
Sounds good.
Leaves us at 9.
I think I missed 2. That's all right.
Everybody good?
We'll figure it.
Are you okay, Carl?
Yeah.
I just want to make one comment on this too, is I think that as I look through these indicators, it's like really interesting. This is where I'm really fortunate to be with a amazing team. It's like some of these I really shouldn't be getting credit for, which is interesting. And I think that I could share those out during the process. Like we're talking about assessment. I mean, Sarah is driving the work of assessment with Erin and with Heather and the principals. I look at what's happening in food service. I mean, that's Susan side by side with Catherine. So I just think it's important too that in some of these that the recognition doesn't I don't get all the recognition or credit for those ones that are really the work situating with others in the organization too. So I just want to make sure to acknowledge that, and we can bring that up in the process too. But
You're
these are the
making-
moments where you feel really fortunate to work as part of a
You're
great.
making an argument for all 21.
No, I'm just saying I feel really fortunate to be part of a great, feel part of a great team where people.
So which ones are you actually responsible for?
Do all day.
That was my argument, Sean.
Okay, so we're at 9. I think we have unanimity. Carla, are you?
Yeah.
Should we, okay. Any further discussion? Otherwise, we'll take a motion. Okay, go ahead, Carla.
I move to approve the superintendent's goals and focus indicators for school year 2022-2023.
Is there a second? Second. Seconded by Chuck. Any further discussion? Seeing none. All in favor? All opposed? Carries 6-0. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Milashevsky. Okay. So the next order of business is the budget guidance for the FY24 budget process. So I'll hand it to Ms. Baton in just a moment, but you'll all remember around this time last year, maybe a little bit later than this, actually, last year, we had a discussion just to sort of put out on the table what are some of our priorities for the team as they work through developing the budget for fiscal year 24. So with that, Ms. Baton.
Yes, well, thank you for the introduction. Before you in the packet this evening outlines the guiding principles you shared with us last year as we entered the FY23 budget development process. We've begun the FY24 process, and we'd like to pause and revisit these, the guidance that you provided to see if there's any additional thoughts that you might have, or direction, or ideas as we work through developing our FY24 budget.
You don't have to raise a hand.
I know, I'm trying to be, it feels more polite if I raise my hand first and then speak instead of just jumping in front of everybody. Just to, I know you would do this, but I just want to say out loud, we do need to be conscientious of the fiscal cliff. We just talked about that, right? And some of those concerns. So ensuring that everything that we budget for this year, that carries an ongoing obligation is sustainable, which may force us to be more conservative than we might like to be in terms of some of those ongoing obligations. So there's that. And then number 2 is I'd really like to see continued progress in the full day kindergarten tuition in this budget as well. Go ahead, Erin.
I feel like the second bullet is really loaded. There's a lot getting talked about, right? There's a lot of initiatives underway. We had the program reviews that revealed a lot of recommendations, some of which would involve new hires, new curriculum. Some of the initiatives would, potentially involve new hires. Certainly, they have fiscal implications, some bigger than others. So, and I'm excited about all of it, but I know that we can't do all of it. So I guess as you start to figure out, as you move forward with your goal too, in terms of figuring out, what we can really bring about for next year, I'd like to know how we can best support that through the budget. So I know that's sort of broad, but like I said, I feel like there's a lot being talked about. I know it's not all going to come to fruition next year, but I'd like us to support as much as we can. I'm particularly interested in the scheduling piece at the high school and at the middle school, as well as math at the middle school. So what we can do, but I'd like to ideally see that reflected. As far as reasonable class sizes, obviously the fourth grades have been a hot button for fourth grade parents. I happen to be one. So I don't envision that we're hiring fifth grade teachers next year, but I would at minimum like us to hang on to the fellows to continue to support those learners next year. And just to, in general, continue to be cognizant of how large those grades are at 3 of our schools. Yeah.
I saw Sarah next and then Chuck. Sure.
Just building off what Erin was saying, I think this is, like, again, a broad kind of statement, but as you're digging in and figuring out priorities, how can we support academic achievement at the middle school level? We have a lot that we're doing in elementary and high school. The middle school needs a lot of attention as well. So I'd like to see some creative ways, whether that's a position or not, or other ways that we can support the work that our curriculum coordinators are doing and take some of and match that with moving the middle schools forward as well.
Chuck.
Probably along the same lines as Aaron and Sarah. I guess Susan posed, just give you the opportunity if there's anything in those that isn't in those guiding principles that you feel you need us to consider to fulfill the things that we've been talking about building the budget. And maybe that's not something that gets decided tonight. Maybe that's after you meet with the district leadership team and the principals and start to build a budget. If you feel like one of the, if we're not aligning with something, then let us know and we can revisit that. I guess that's probably what you guys were saying.
Tom?
Potentially saying all that and summing it up or whatever, and going back to what Sean said about, conservative planning potentially to address the cliff, as well as Aaron's school improvement plan stuff, all that stuff is there. I think we need to be transparent with how we're making those decisions, right? Which may mean that there may have to be option 1, option 2, option 3 come in the beginning of January, that throughout January we coalesce to the option, whatever that might be, right? Pros and cons that you all have debated and discussed, or collectively we have as well through some of the strategic planning conversations. How could we lay out some of these priorities? Maybe it does start with elementary half day. Maybe it starts with scheduling in the middle school and the high school, whatever it is, but there's a lot on that list, some of which we've already somewhat committed to the community as well when it comes to full day kindergarten so what are our options to play this Rubik's Cube? Because that's what we're playing with right now, right? We have a lot of different pieces we're moving around to try and get to the optimal staffing and optimal structure for our organization. And it might take 2 or 3 or 4 years of moving that Rubik's Cube as we plan it out. So what are our options to take those steps? So, and if we do that in such a transparent fashion that people can participate where necessary, maybe I'm being overly optimistic that we'll have people show up to January meetings, but then I think we've done our job, right? We've said, here's the problem, the potential way to solve it, potential ways to solve it, and then we as a committee with your guidance, help, and leadership can say, okay, let's go with this option that fits into the bucket of plan, is sustainable on a go-forward basis, and allows us to layer in the next option the next year and the next option the next year. So as you think through it, I know you're already doing the multi-year planning and whatnot, but how do things come in and go out of that plan so we can address it collectively?
Thank you.
Go ahead, Carla.
I know you're going to be just going through a lot of different things and setting a lot of priorities. For me, obviously the ESSER issues and ESSER cliff, and just trying to maintain what we currently have in place, because that was obviously, those positions were so important to us and so critical for us. Scheduling at the high school, I think that opportunity of making those changes will help us in so many other ways as well, in terms of opening up potential positions for pathways as well. So I think it just makes us more efficient at the high school and at the middle school levels. My second tier almost is, and I know we have our core, but is the reading progress of these learners, these early learners and early readers during COVID, just making sure we have those supports, a layer on top of that, because that's just so fundamental for these students. With the special ed program development, that's another, like, there's the need to haves, right? That's a huge piece of it in terms of what kind of staffing we need there. We're making our commitment. My third layer almost is we're making our commitment. We've already moved towards half-day or full-day K. But I also think that half-day schedule at the elementary school is critical.
The Friday afternoon.
The Friday afternoon. But I have that as my, like, third block almost of things. The special ed programs, the reading progress for the elementary school, and the scheduling, I think, are three of my tops.
Better.
Regarding creative ways to recruit and retain the workforce, I'm particularly interested in the retain piece, and looking at where are we losing people? Is there a certain level? Is there a certain position at which we're losing more people? And why? And, is it a monetary reason? And is there anything that we can do because we have such strong staff, and I feel like we invest so much in the training and development. So I'm particularly interested in that retention piece, and how are we hanging on to staff?
Okay, anything else? Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Susan.
Okay, so our next two agenda items are first readings of two policies. These policies have, I think, existed in the MASC policy manual for at least a few years, maybe 3 years. So we're sort of catching up, I would say, incorporating them into our policy manual. In discussion, Tom and I sort of agreed that it was because they're model policies that we're sort of catching up on versus ones we're crafting for Reading in particular. That, it was probably best to just bring them directly to a first reading of the committee rather than having this, throwing one more or two more things on the plate of the policy subcommittee. So we'll take a first reading tonight, and then we will probably do a second reading at our next meeting and adopt these policies. I'll just remind folks that Carla will start reading each policy. There is the option for somebody to waive the reading of the policy, so just throw that out there. If anybody really wants to put Carla through the ringer, you can just keep your mouth shut, that's fine.
I'm going to start talking really loudly.
So why don't we start with JFABE, Educational Opportunities for Military Children.
Do you want to share it? Do you want me to share it?
Oh yeah, I'm sorry, I've got it shared, I'll just scroll down so it's on the Zoom as well. Here we go. Go ahead, Carla.
Educational Opportunities for Military Children.
Move to waive the reading of the policy. Is that enough?
Seconded by Sarah. I don't think there's a discussion on this. All in favor? All opposed? 6-0. Okay, so we don't have to do the reading. So Tom, anything you want to say about this one and sort of how we got to the version we're looking at?
So, yes, just briefly. So this came up, just as a background, this came up as a gap in our policies when Dr. Stice was going through the tiered focus monitoring related stuff. So this year, tiered focus monitoring is looking at homeless children, which we have already, but we're going to go through some amendments later on this year, military, which we don't have, and foster, which we don't have. So in the response back to the tiered focus monitoring process, we said, we have homeless, we know we need to update it, we don't have these other two, we're going to pick it up this year. So this is us fulfilling that obligation to align with the tiered focus monitoring. In terms of any of the updates here, Colby did take a read through. You can, the blue language that's been updated or changed is Colby's work. And then there's a few little minor red ones that were me making adjustments as Microsoft and others were telling me to do so. But otherwise, it is as it is from the mask documentation. So Colby was pleasantly surprised at the improvement in the quality of the mask policies. She historically has had some critical statements, so far so good in this one, and I would suggest we accept it as is unless anybody has any major adjustments they want to put in there. Or even minor, if you want to adjust language in minor ways.
Any feedback on this one for the first reading? You will have another opportunity, I believe on December 1st, but. No? Okay. So we will move on to JFABF, which pertains to,
Actually, I'm sorry.
go ahead, Erin. Just under the wire.
Sorry, page 2, and there might be more up above. Fourth bullet has a he or she. I would propose we change that to they. I think that's what we've been doing with our other policies that we've been updating, so.
Can you just read it, which part?
An eligible student living with a non-custodial parent or other person standing in loco parentis shall be permitted to continue to attend the school in which he or she, so instead they were enrolled. So it would be they were.
Okay.
I don't know if there's a.
So we'll include that edit when we do the second reading next time?
Yep.
Okay. And maybe, I mean, I can do it as well, but we'll just take a scan and see if there are any others that
one
snuck
more
in.
on the
Okay, I
next
think
one.
otherwise it just refers to them as like children or students, so.
Okay. Anything else on JFABE? Okay. JFABF is same sort of preamble as Tom just shared, but it's around children in foster care. So Carla, would you like to read the
I would love
read
to.
the policy for us?
Educational opportunities for children in
Move to
foster
waive the
care.
reading of the policy.
Is there a second? Sarah seconded again. All in favor of waiving the reading? All opposed, 6-0. Okay, any discussion on this one?
There is another he, she on the second, under immediate enrollment on the second page, page 36, first paragraph.
Which he or she resides in foster care?
Yes.
And they can work there without any other language change? In which they reside should be
Yeah.
singular?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's also his or her under the best interest determination. First paragraph. Third line from the bottom of that paragraph. Student and his or her foster care placement.
So there,
Foster care placement, yep.
It's also down, same thing as
Yep.
down in the second paragraph
Yep.
under best interest.
Good catch. Okay, anything else on this one for the first reading? Okay, so we are now going to take a motion to move to executive session. Let's take the motion, take the vote, and then I'll offer some comments.
I move to enter into executive session for the purposes of conducting strategy sessions in preparation for collective bargaining with all of our collective bargaining units, and to discuss strategy with respect to ongoing litigation. We will return to open session in approximately 45 minutes.
Second.
Seconded by Aaron. I don't believe this one is debatable either. All in favor?
we need roll call vote.
Oh, yeah, we're going to take a roll call. Before I take the roll call vote, I'm also required to assert that our bargaining position would be undermined by holding the discussion that we're going to have about collective bargaining strategy in open session. So I'm so asserting that. Okay, roll call. Chuck?
Yes.
Sarah?
Aye.
Aaron?
Aye.
Tom?
Aye.
Carla?
Aye.
And Sean, aye. Okay, so we are adjourned to executive session. We'll return in about 45 minutes. To order in open session. So for anybody watching at home, the district was approached with the opportunity to participate in a mass action suit against Juul Labs, the maker of Juul. So we had a discussion in executive session about whether or not that was something we were interested in pursuing, or whether we only wanted to reserve the right to not pursue it as part of a mass action. And so we will now take a motion and vote, and that should conclude our evening, more or less. Carla?
I move to direct the superintendent not to join the mass action suit against Juul Labs.
And is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Tom. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor? All opposed? It carries 6-0. Okay, and any final motions?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
I'm going to give that one to Aaron. All in favor? All opposed? 6-0. Night, everyone. Thank you.